So Sundra suggested that I talk about happiness, and my quick quip was, oh, I don't know about that, but that's actually not true. I think happiness is a great topic to talk about. And for me, actually, one of the most meaningful teachings in helping me to understand this, I heard from Venerable Sangye Kadro. And she was talking about that there are 3 kinds of happiness. She said the first kind is, of course, the sense pleasure that we know as happiness, which, you know, it has its value. We get our little buzz off of it. It's very brief, and the seed of misery is right there in the very happiness that we experience, because it's going to change immediately. And even, they say in the teaching on the suffering of change, that very feeling of sensual, of happiness in response to that sensual pleasure is actually a kind of suffering. But that at the very best, it's simply a suppression of the suffering, of like suppressing the suffering of hunger with the very brief pleasure of actually being filled, like that. So it's very unsatisfying. A second kind of happiness, though, she said, comes from practicing the Dharma. And I'm certain that when, you know, when you have some level of meditative stabilization and you're getting some level of bliss from your practice, that's a kind of happiness that is unmistakable. But even at our level, even at the very beginning, that sense of peace, or that sense of satisfaction, or that sense of upliftment that comes from doing our practices, meditating on love and compassion, or doing a deity practice and really feeling connected to the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas at any given time, or, you know, working with antidotes when our mind has just been insane and we get that little bit of relief from applying the Dharma. I mean, that is really a form of happiness. And at first when I heard this teaching, I thought, well, that's kind of subtle. But the more I thought about it, and certainly the more I've thought about it over the years, it's not so subtle. I mean, that's a kind of happiness that is very clear. It's not giddy. It doesn't have the buzz that we associate with the term happiness, with our sensual pleasure happiness. But it's a kind of quiet satisfaction, or you could even call it a kind of peace in our minds that really comes from applying the Dharma. And that, in my experience also, that happiness grows with rejoicing in recognizing it and continuing to apply the Dharma teachings again and again and again. So it actually begins to sustain itself. It's not just, oh, a little bit of peace after one session, and then 10 days later I might get a little bit of peace after one session. I mean, it becomes daily. It becomes something that's a whole part of our day. So that, too, is an important kind of happiness that I think in our practice day to day, it's very important to recognize and rejoice about, to really get, because that's what will sustain us and help us to make it grow. And then the third kind of happiness, she said, comes from the realization of emptiness, or the realization of bodhicitta, and having, you know, those major realizations that sustain us all the way to Buddhahood. So, you know, we're on the way there, we hope, or that's certainly our goal and aspiration. But I do think that really focusing on this happiness that comes from our practice is very, very supportive for all that we do. And that when we get down on ourselves, or we think, oh, I don't really know anything about happiness, blah, 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 that is a self-centered thought that is lying to us. That is a liar. We do know. And the more we recognize and really celebrate that, I think the happier and more content we'll be with our practice, to just let it unfold rather than striving for something. So thanks for the topic suggestion, Sundra.